No fear. An Inner Steel original script. 10,000 words. Cold open, first 3 seconds. You are already dead. Not literally. But the version of you that fear controls, that man is dead the moment he lets it run his life. And right now, I need you to understand something that most men will never hear, never accept, and never act on. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is your cage. And the only man who walks free is the one who looks at that cage, grabs the bars with both hands, and tears them apart, not because he isn't afraid, but because he decided that fear no longer gets to make his decisions. That man? That's who we're building here. Stay with me. Opening. There is a conversation that happens in the dark, inside your chest, at 2 a.m., when you're staring at the ceiling, when the decision you've been avoiding is still sitting in the corner of the room like something alive. It speaks quietly. It always does. What if it doesn't work? What if they laugh at you? What if you fail, and everyone sees it? What if you try and you find out the worst, that you're simply not enough? That voice. That is fear. And it has been running your life without your permission. Every man who ever built something worth building knew that voice. Marcus Aurelius heard it. Teddy Roosevelt heard it. Every soldier who ever stepped onto a battlefield, every father who ever stood over a hospital bed, every man who ever risked his pride on something that mattered, they all heard it. The difference was never silence. Fear doesn't go quiet. The difference was action in spite of it. This video is not about becoming fearless. That word is a lie sold to men who don't know better. This video is about becoming fear-proof, a man so grounded in purpose, so trained in discipline, so anchored in his own identity that fear becomes background noise instead of the loudest voice in the room. There are 10 things you are going to understand today. 10 truths about fear, about courage, about what happens to the man who finally stops running. By the time this is over, something will have shifted. It may be quiet. It may feel small. But it will be real. If you're new here, welcome to Inner Steel. Subscribe. This channel is built for men who refuse to settle for a smaller version of themselves. Hit the notification bell. This conversation continues. Let's go. Point 1. Fear is information, not instruction. The first thing you have to understand about fear is this: it is not a verdict. It is data. Your nervous system was designed millions of years ago to keep you alive in a world of predators, famine, and unpredictable violence. When your ancestor stepped out of the cave and heard a rustle in the grass, fear flooded his body with cortisol and adrenaline so he could run, fight, or freeze fast enough to survive. That mechanism saved the species. The problem? That same mechanism fires when you're about to send a business proposal. When you're about to ask a woman out. When you're thinking about starting the channel, launching the company, having the hard conversation with your father. Your brain does not know the difference between a predator in the grass and professional rejection. It only knows threat detected. And so it floods you with the same ancient chemistry, the same racing heart, the same dry mouth, the same urge to do nothing, to stay safe, to stay small. Understanding this is everything. Because once you know that fear is just a signal, not a sentence, you can begin to use it instead of obey it. Here is the story of a man named James Stockdale. In 1965, Navy pilot James Stockdale was shot down over Vietnam and captured. He was held prisoner for 7.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton, one of the most brutal POW camps in recorded history. He was tortured over 20 times. He spent 4 years in solitary confinement. He was starved, beaten, and subjected to conditions that broke men younger and physically stronger than him. And here is what Stockdale said years later when asked how he survived when so many others didn't. He said, "I never wavered in my faith that the end of the story would be that I would prevail in the end and turn it into the defining event of my life which, in retrospect, I would not trade." But then he said something that stopped author Jim Collins cold. Collins asked, "Who didn't make it out?" Stockdale said, "The optimists. The men who broke first were the ones who said, 'We'll be out by Christmas.' And Christmas came and went. Then Easter. Then the next Christmas. Each time, their hope was crushed. And eventually, the crushing broke them, not just in spirit, but in body. They lost the will to survive. Stockdale survived because he treated fear as information. He felt it, he processed it, and then he chose his response. He did not let fear instruct him into blind hope or into despair. He faced brutal reality with absolute clarity and kept moving forward. That is what it means to use fear instead of obeying it. The next time fear shows up, sit with it for 1 second. Don't run. Ask, what is this telling me? Is there a real threat here that I need to address? Or is this just the caveman alarm, misfiring in a world where the stakes are pride, not survival? Usually, it's the second one. And when you know that, you can nod at it, acknowledge it, and walk straight through it. Point 2. The man fear most wants to stop is the man closest to greatness. Here is something no one talks about enough. The intensity of your fear is often proportional to the importance of what you're about to do. This is not a coincidence. It is the nature of meaningful risk. A man who is about to do something irrelevant doesn't feel much fear. A man who is about to do something that could change his life, that could change everything, feels it in his bones. Fear is not evidence that you're wrong. Sometimes it's evidence that you're right on the edge of something that matters. Think about the most important decisions in your life, the ones you look back on now as turning points. Starting that relationship. Moving to that city. Quitting that job that was killing you softly. Having that conversation you'd been avoiding for years. Were you afraid? Of course you were. And if you made the move, if you did the thing despite the fear, how did it turn out? Not always perfectly. Not always cleanly. But it moved your life. It built something in you that comfort could never have built. Because on the other side of the fear was the version of yourself you were being called to become. Now, the story. In 1962, a young British author had just completed his first novel after years of writing in obscurity. He sent the manuscript to publisher after publisher. 12 of them rejected it. 12 professional opinions that his work wasn't worth publishing. The man's name was John le Carre. The novel was The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. It went on to become one of the greatest spy novels ever written. It sold in the millions. Le Carre became one of the most celebrated authors of the 20th century. And he said later that if he had stopped at 10 rejections, at 11, at 12, he would never have known what he was capable of. Here's what fear was telling him at rejection number 12. Stop. You're not good enough. This is over. Here's what reality was telling him. You are one step from everything. Fear most wants to stop you at the moment you are closest to the breakthrough. This is why the men who push through that final wall of resistance are so rare, and why the rewards waiting on the other side are so extraordinary. Understand this. The intensity of the resistance you feel is often a compass. It points toward what matters. Let it. Point 3. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something matters more. There is a lie that men grow up believing. That courage is a feeling. That brave men don't feel fear, they just don't have it. That if you feel afraid, it means something is wrong with you. That fear is weakness. This is one of the most damaging ideas a man can carry. Because what it does is make fear a source of shame rather than a source of information. It makes men hide their fear instead of facing it. And hidden fear doesn't shrink, it grows. In the dark, unseen, unnamed, it expands until it becomes the shape of the room. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of something that matters more. It is the father who is terrified of hospitals walking into the oncology ward every day for 6 months because his child is in there. It is the young soldier whose hands are shaking but whose feet are moving forward. It is the entrepreneur who is genuinely not certain he won't lose everything, who wakes up and opens his laptop and works anyway. Courage is a decision. Every single time. The story. In the summer of 1940, Winston Churchill stood before a parliament that was deeply divided. France had fallen. The British army had barely escaped at Dunkirk. Hitler's forces controlled most of Western Europe. There were members of his own cabinet, senior, experienced men, who were pushing Churchill to negotiate with Nazi Germany. To find terms. To protect what was left. Churchill was afraid. We know this. His private letters make it clear. He knew what Britain was facing. He understood the odds. He had no guarantee of American support. He had no guarantee of anything. But he stood up in Parliament, and he spoke. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. That speech didn't come from the absence of fear. It came from a decision that something mattered more than fear. The survival of freedom. The lives of future generations. The kind of world his children would inherit. The courage wasn't the absence of trembling. The courage was showing up and speaking anyway. This is the template. This is what you are building, not a man who never shakes, but a man whose commitment to something greater than his comfort makes the shaking irrelevant. What matters more to you than your fear? Find it. Name it. Write it down. And the next time fear shows up, hold that thing next to it and ask which one gets to decide. Point 4. The body must be trained before the mind will follow. There is a reason that every serious tradition of warrior culture throughout history, from the Spartans to the samurai to the special forces, centers physical training as the foundation of psychological resilience. This is not about aesthetics. It is not about being able to lift impressive numbers or look good in a mirror. It is about something far more fundamental, teaching the body, through deliberate and repeated experience, that discomfort is survivable. When you push yourself physically, when you run past the point your body says stop, when you hold a position past what is comfortable, when you grind through the final set even though every fiber is burning, you are doing something that operates below the level of thought. You are building what the military calls stress inoculation. You are proving to your nervous system, in a language it understands, that you do not fold under pressure. And here is the critical thing, that proof transfers. A man who has trained himself to function through physical pain does not collapse at the first sign of professional difficulty. A man who gets up at 5 a.m. every morning regardless of how he feels carries that discipline into every corner of his life. A man who has deliberately put himself in hard situations and come out the other side knows, at a cellular level, that he can handle hard things. The story. David Goggins grew up in poverty, in a household defined by violence and abuse. He was overweight, struggling, a man by the numbers who should not have become what he became. At his lowest point, he weighed around 300 pounds and was working as an exterminator, spraying cockroaches at night, dreaming of a different life but not moving toward it. Then he heard about Navy SEAL training, considered by most to be the hardest military selection program in the world. The dropout rate is over 75%. With almost no running background, David Goggins lost 106 pounds in under 3 months to meet the minimum weight requirement, and then went to BED/S. He didn't pass on his first attempt. Or his second. He broke bones, he developed stress fractures, he was medically rolled back multiple times. Each time, he went back. He finished. He became a Navy SEAL. He then went on to complete Army Ranger School and Air Force Tactical Air Controller training. He ran a 100-mile race with almost no preparation on fractured feet and finished it. He broke the world record for pull-ups in 24 hours. None of that happened through inspiration. None of it came from a motivational video or a good feeling. It came from one decision, made in the body, hammered in daily: I will not stop. Goggins calls it callousing the mind. You make it hard on purpose. You refuse ease. You seek the difficulty. And in doing so, you build a version of yourself that fear cannot shake the way it shakes a soft man. Train your body. Not to look powerful. To become it. Point 5. What you avoid owns you. Here is one of the least comfortable truths in this entire video. Look at it directly. Whatever you are avoiding, that thing owns you. Not partially. Completely. The difficult conversation you haven't had. The business idea you've been circling for 3 years but never started. The apology you haven't made. The medical appointment you've been putting off. The relationship you've stayed in because leaving feels like too much. The relationship you've stayed out of because vulnerability feels like too much. Every single thing you've been avoiding lives in your body as tension. As a low-level, constant background hum of dread. It takes up space in your mind that should be used for living. It drains energy you could be putting into building something. And every day you don't face it, its power over you increases. Avoidance is not protection. It is surrender on an installment plan. The Stoics had a practice called negative visualization, premeditatio malorum, where they would deliberately imagine the worst outcome of the thing they feared. Not to terrify themselves. To deafen the fear. To make it concrete, visible, and therefore manageable. Because once you can see the worst clearly, it loses the monstrous, shapeless quality that makes it so paralyzing. The story. Demosthenes is considered by many historians to be the greatest orator in the ancient world. The man could hold thousands of people in the palm of his hand with the power of his words. He moved armies with speeches. He shaped the political future of Athens. What most people don't know is that as a young man, Demosthenes had a severe stutter. He was laughed off the stage the first time he tried to speak publicly. He was ridiculed. He left humiliated, and every instinct he had told him to never go back. He chose differently. He went to the sea and practiced speaking with pebbles in his mouth, forcing his tongue to work harder than it ever had to. He recited speeches while running uphill. He shaved one side of his head so he would be too embarrassed to be seen in public, so he had no choice but to stay home and practice. He turned his greatest source of shame, the thing he most wanted to avoid, into the arena where he would become legendary. The thing you're avoiding is not evidence of your weakness. It is where your power is buried. The avoidance is the cage. The facing of it is the key. What have you been putting off? Name it out loud. Right now, in the room you're sitting in. Name it. Because named things shrink. Unnamed things grow. Then go toward it. Point 6. Your identity must be built on what you do, not what you feel. Modern culture has become obsessed with feelings. With authenticity. With being true to yourself. Which, in practice, often means giving your emotional state permission to run your decisions. If you feel like going to the gym, you go. If you don't feel like it, you rest. If you feel brave, you act. If you feel afraid, you wait until the feeling passes. The problem with this framework is that feelings are weather. They change constantly. They are unreliable. They respond to sleep, to diet, to what happened 3 hours ago, to the tone of a text message you received this morning. Building your identity on something that shifts daily is building your house on sand. The men who endure, the men who build real things, who create real lives, who show up as real fathers and real leaders, they are not men who feel consistently motivated. They are men who have decided what they are, and who act accordingly regardless of how they feel. This is what the Stoics called character, the bedrock of a man beneath the weather of emotion. Marcus Aurelius was not a man who woke up every morning feeling inspired. He was the emperor of Rome, a role of staggering pressure, endless difficulty, constant ingratitude, and political danger. He wrote in his private journal, what we now call the Meditations, not as a man who had figured it all out, but as a man talking himself back to his values every single morning. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. What do I have to complain of, if I'm going to do what I was born for?" This is a man building his identity on action, not on feeling. The story. Ernest Shackleton. In 1914, he led an expedition to cross Antarctica. The ship, the Endurance, became trapped in pack ice and was eventually crushed by it. 28 men were stranded on the ice in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. No radio contact. No rescue coming. No guarantee of survival. For months, Shackleton managed the morale, the discipline, and the cohesion of those men. Not because he felt confident. Not because he felt fearless. But because he decided what kind of man he was, a leader, and he performed that identity every single day regardless of what was happening inside him. He joked with the men. He organized activities. He made decisions. He kept the group together. Every single one of those 28 men survived. It is considered one of the greatest acts of leadership in human history. Shackleton was not a man defined by his feelings. He was a man defined by his decisions about who he was. And when the weather inside turned dark, as it did, as it must, his identity held because it was built on something solid. Decide who you are. Then be that man every day, feeling it or not. Point 7. Fear of failure is the most expensive comfort you will ever choose. At some point, the cost of staying safe becomes greater than the cost of risk. Most men don't realize when they've crossed that line. They never look at the math of an action. They only feel the fear of action. But here is what you're actually choosing when you let fear of failure keep you still. You are choosing the guaranteed failure of never trying over the possible failure of having tried. You are choosing the slow death of regret, which is certain, over the fast death of a specific attempt that might not work, which is possible but not guaranteed. Men who never risk never lose publicly. But they lose privately, every day, in the space between who they are and who they could have been. Theodore Roosevelt gave a speech in 1910 at the Sorbonne in Paris. It contained one of the most quoted passages in the history of leadership. He said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly." The story. Michael Jordan, the standard by which athletic greatness has been measured for a generation, was cut from his high school varsity basketball team. He went home and cried. He described it later as one of the most painful moments of his early life. But what he did next is what made him Michael Jordan and not just another kid who got cut. He went to the gym and worked. Every day. Early. Harder than the people around him. He used the cut not as evidence that he wasn't good enough, but as fuel. As information. As a direction to push. He went on to win 6 NBA championships. 6 Finals MVP awards. He is widely considered the greatest basketball player who has ever played the game. But that story begins with failure. Not with talent. Not with destiny. With a door slamming in his face and a choice, whether that door would define him, or whether he would define himself. Failure is not the end. Failure is round 1. The men who give up in round 1 never know what would have happened in round 3, round 10, round 20. The men who stay in the fight find out. Stay in the fight. Point 8. Silence is where your power is rebuilt. In a world that is getting louder every year, more notifications, more opinions, more noise, silence has become one of the most radical and powerful choices a man can make. Fear is amplified by noise. It grows in the chaos of constant input. When you are always consuming, always scrolling, always listening to something, always responding to something, you never create the interior space needed to process what you're actually feeling. The fear just circulates without being examined. It becomes background radiation. Invisible but constant. Slowly draining you. Silence is where you confront what is actually there. It is uncomfortable. It is why most men avoid it. But it is also where clarity lives. Where direction comes from. Where the truest version of your thinking surfaces, undistorted by the noise of other people's voices and opinions. The Stoics built silence into their practice deliberately. Cato the Elder, Roman politician, soldier, and one of the most formidable men in Roman history, was famous for spending long periods in deliberate quiet before making major decisions. He believed that a man who could not be alone with his own thoughts was a man who did not know himself. and a man who did not know himself could be moved by anything. The story. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist living in Vienna when the Nazis rose to power. He was sent to Auschwitz, then Dachau, then 3 other concentration camps. He lost his wife, his mother, his brother. He experienced the systematic destruction of everything external that a man can have. And in that darkness, stripped of everything, he found something the Nazis could not take. He found the space between stimulus and response. He found silence. Not the silence of a quiet room. The silence of a man who has gone so deep into himself that the external world cannot fully reach him. He observed the guards. He observed the other prisoners. He began to understand that the last human freedom, the one that can never be taken, is the freedom to choose your attitude toward whatever happens to you. He wrote about it later in Man's Search for Meaning. He described how men in the camps who maintained their inner life, their inner silence, their connection to something beyond the immediate terror, were more likely to survive. Not physically, there were no guarantees there. But spiritually, they remained men. They remained whole, even as everything around them was designed to break them down to nothing. The power of silence is the power of a man who knows himself. Who can go inside and find something steady there. Who doesn't need the external world to validate him or distract him. Build the practice. Turn off the noise. Sit with yourself. It will be uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is the fear that has been circulating. Let it surface. Name it. Release it. This is not weakness. This is how warriors have been rebuilt throughout history, in the quiet before the battle. Point 9. Surround yourself with men who do not allow you to shrink. There is a principle in behavioral science that has been studied and confirmed in multiple research environments, across cultures, across demographics. You become the average of the people closest to you. Not metaphorically. Neurologically. Your brain contains mirror neurons, cells that literally fire in response to what you observe in other people, as if you yourself were doing it. This is why watching someone eat makes you hungry. This is why yawning is contagious. This is why spending time with genuinely motivated, disciplined, courageous men rewires your own baseline. The men around you are shaping the version of you that gets built. If the men closest to you complain constantly, accept mediocrity, laugh at ambition, and validate your avoidance, they are building a smaller version of you every day you spend with them. Not maliciously, in most cases. They simply can't see beyond their own limitations, and human nature makes us want to pull others to our level. But if you surround yourself with men who are building, who are in the arena, who are failing and getting up, who do not allow each other to stay comfortable in smallness, you will find that your own courage rises to meet theirs. Iron sharpens iron. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual mechanism of human development. The story. In the 1970s, a group of young men in Silicon Valley began meeting regularly in each other's garages. They called themselves the Homebrew Computer Club. The group included a young Steve Jobs and a young Steve Wozniak, but also dozens of other engineers, thinkers, and builders who were obsessed with the same question: what can the computer do for the individual? They weren't competing with each other in those early meetings. They were sharpening each other. They shared ideas. They challenged each other's assumptions. They showed up to those sessions because the room contained the kind of minds that made you think bigger and want more. Out of those sessions came Apple. Out of that environment of men who did not allow each other to settle came the personal computer revolution. Not one of those men could have done it alone. Not because they lacked talent. Because greatness doesn't emerge in isolation from other great men. It emerges in the friction, the challenge, the refusal of peers who hold a higher standard to let you coast. Look at the 5 men closest to you right now. Where are they going? What are they building? What do they tolerate in themselves and in you? That answer tells you something important about your future. You don't have to abandon the people you love. But you have to be intentional about who gets the most of your time and your energy. Because those men, those conversations, are the soil in which the next version of you grows or doesn't. Build your brotherhood carefully. If this community has given you something today, If Inner Steel has been part of that brotherhood for you, subscribe. Share this with a man who needs to hear it. This channel exists for exactly this, building the standard higher, together. Point 10. The life on the other side of fear is the one you were actually meant to live. We have come a long way in this conversation. And now it's time to close with the thing that makes all of this worth understanding. There is a version of your life that exists on the other side of fear. Not a perfect life. Not a painless life. But a real one. A full one. A life where you look back and recognize yourself in it, where what you built, what you sacrificed, what you risked, what you loved, all of it reflects the actual man you were capable of being. That life is not waiting for you to feel ready. It is not waiting for the fear to go away. It is not waiting for the circumstances to align. It is not waiting for permission. It is waiting for a decision. One decision. To walk toward the thing that matters most to you, even while afraid. And then tomorrow, make it again. And the day after. Not heroically. Not dramatically. Quietly, in the morning, before anyone else is watching, before anyone can see the fear or the doubt or the uncertainty, you get up and you go toward the thing. This is what the Stoics called living according to nature, meaning living fully as what you actually are. A man capable of reason, of courage, of purpose. Not a man reduced to reaction and avoidance. Not a man who gave the best years of his life to the management of fear. A man who lived. The story. There was an old man in his 80s who was interviewed about his life. He had taken risks that didn't always pay off. He had started businesses that failed. He had loved deeply and lost. He had moved countries, changed careers, raised difficult children through impossible circumstances, and buried people he couldn't imagine living without. And at the end of all of it, the interviewer asked him, "If you could go back, what would you change?" He thought for a long moment. And he said, "I would have been afraid less. Not braver, I was as brave as I could be. But I would have spent less time being afraid and more time actually living. Because when I look back, the moments that mattered were the ones where I did the thing I was afraid to do. And the moments I regret are the ones where the fear won." Then he paused. He said, "The fear never actually went away. I just got better at going first and letting it catch up with me later." Going first. And letting the fear catch up. That is the whole lesson. That is the whole life. You go first. You make the call, have the conversation, launch the thing, show up, build the discipline, carry the weight, love the people who need your love, lead the room that needs a leader. And then, maybe, you let yourself feel it afterward. The trembling. The uncertainty. The relief. But you go first. Closing. Let me bring this together for you. Fear is information, not instruction. It is a signal, not a sentence. The most important things you will ever do will be surrounded by it. Courage is not its absence. Courage is the decision that something matters more. Your body must be trained for your mind to follow. Avoidance costs more than confrontation. Your identity must be built on what you do, not what you feel. The fear of failure is the most expensive comfort you will ever choose. Silence is where your power is rebuilt. The men around you are either sharpening you or softening you. And on the other side of fear is the only life worth living. None of these are comfortable truths. But you didn't come here for comfort. You came here because something in you is done being small. Because some part of you is tired of letting the voice in the dark make decisions on behalf of the man you know you could be. That man is still there. He's been there the whole time. Underneath the avoidance, beneath the noise, past the comfort, he's been waiting for you to decide. Make the decision. Not tomorrow. Not when the conditions are better or the fear is quieter or you feel more ready. Now. If this hit home, if something in this conversation moves something in you, leave a comment. Tell us what you're going to walk toward. There is power in naming it publicly. There is power in a community of men who are watching each other move. Subscribe to Inner Steel. Hit the bell. Every week, we come back here and we build. Because this is not a single conversation. This is a practice. A standard. A way of being in the world. And the standard is this: no fear gets to be the last word. You are the last word. Now go. End of script. Inner steel, no fear. Approximate 10,000 words.